I'm going to start with math and test anxiety and a definition of that. So there are different aspects of anxiety, and how it manifests itself is important to understand. There's an emotional response that ranges from mild stress to acute anxiety and is usually based on past experience. We found that a lot of people who are dealing with math or test anxiety have had issues with mathematics since they were very young. Some starting as far back as third grade when they were learning multiplication tables or starting to learn fractions or ratios, and others a little later on when they started to learn algebra. And there's a biological response to acute stress. There's a perception of danger, and the brain switches over to a part of the brain that doesn't control the intellect. What it controls is our responses to fight or flight. And so this activates a different part of the brain. And so it's very common complaint is that on a test, people will say, my mind has gone blank. And that's a really strong indication that you're dealing with a certain level of test anxiety. That higher level of thinking gets turned off, and the part of the brain that deals with stress, with being attacked, is turned on. They've actually done brain research on this, and they found that the same part of the brain gets turned on as it would if you were under extreme levels of pain. So it is definitely a biological response. And physiologically, you go into what we call fight or flight. And so you become hyper alert and attentive to the environment. Your focus goes away from detail. The part of the brain that's managing responses controls your spontaneous or intuitive behaviors, which are often related to combat or escape. And because this is an emotional response, it can't be resolved intellectually. You can't talk yourself out of it. But it can be managed, and I'm going to talk about those types of things, of how we can manage that stress. So let's go into that part of the presentation. How can you take control and make sure that you can manage your stress? Well, the first thing to do is you need to recognize that you have these issues and assess the type of anxiety, because there's different ways of dealing with it depending on the type of anxiety. So as I go through this presentation, think about where you fit. And then when I get to the part where I talk about what you can do about it, it'll be easier for you to focus in on that. Once we've identified that you have the stress, you want to determine appropriate measures to help you overcome the issues, and that means addressing the issue so that you can improve your ability to demonstrate what you really know and are able to do. And then you want to make sure that you share these accommodations with your instructor and your support group and your advisors, and because you don't have to do this all by yourself. And I will also talk about that in this presentation. So let's talk about the physiological symptoms. I'm going to start with fight. That's our attack or protect. Some of us, when we go into this high stress level, go into a fight mode. And when you look at, I split it down into math anxiety and test anxiety because they're very different from one another. People that are struggling with math anxiety, for instance, their bodies will tense. They'll be short-tempered, quick to anger, maybe a belligerent attitude, and agitated. But then there's also passive-aggressive behaviors where you might feel like you're making excuses or blaming others rather than taking responsibility for yourself. Test anxiety manifests itself as in the fight mode as ridiculous answers or comments that are off topic or provocative answers, and excessive erasing or scratching out. In the passive-aggressive mode, you may take too long setting up for the test or arranging your materials or putting things away. You might spend much too much time on one problem, giving an excessive explanation or detail on problems which take up massive amounts of time. So if any of these seem familiar, you want to mark fight as your normal response to that stress. Now we're going to look at flight, and there's two different levels of flight as well. We're either going to hide or flee. Just think about if you were being attacked by a tiger. You're either going to stand up and fight, or you're going to turn around and run away as fast as you can, or you're going to try to make yourself very, 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 very small and hide somewhere and hope the tiger doesn't hear you breathing. What happens physiologically is our breath, our breathing will get more shallow, and we have a hard time focusing because we're looking all around us. So let's take a look at this hide mode with math anxiety. You may not be coming to class. You may have so much anxiety that you can't quite even get to school. You may not hand in homework, or you may hand it in late. Procrastination is a really strong indication that everything else is taking priority other than the mathematics. And you may feel very uncomfortable when you're talking about mathematics. If you are in the flight mode, you may feel very fidgety and unable to focus or concentrate, and you may be frequently late or frequently leave early. If you are looking at test anxiety, the only days you seem to feel sick are on test days, and that's when you don't come to class, or you may come in late for the test, or you may be feeling like you're working really hard at the test, but when you hand it in the majority, with the majority of the class, there's very few problems that you've answered. Flight, you rush through the test as quickly as you can, minimal answers, and leave as quickly as you can before everyone else. So these are symptoms of flight or hide. I want to show you an example of what I've seen in this respect. You'll notice in the first example, find the x. Here it is. The x is circled. Obviously a ridiculous answer when we're talking about the mathematics. The expectation when we say find the x is to solve for the x. And then on the right hand side you see a lot of very detailed work. This is definitely above developmental math level, but at the end excessive scratching out or erasing, and then the poor hangman at the bottom. So it's a very common occurrence for there to be anxiety. So what are our solutions to the test anxiety? Test anxiety happens to be one of the easier levels of anxiety to work with, because most students are coming to class, they're working hard, they're doing their homework, and then test time arrives, and that's when their stress level goes up. Well, the first thing you want to realize is that your testing environment should reflect your learning process. So there are things that you can do. If you normally study using these stress releasers, discuss them with your instructor as to how you can use them during a test. For example, if you tend to eat when you're doing your math homework, maybe doing a snack, you might want to bring in some food during the testing environment. And again, talk to your instructor about that. One thing that's interesting about eating is that it actually tells your body you're not being attacked, because you certainly wouldn't stop to eat or drink if a tiger was attacking. So refreshments actually tell your body that it's okay to calm down, and it actually lowers the stress. The problem is that when we're under that level of stress, we don't have an urge to eat. And so even if you bring things in, you may not feel like eating, but I would recommend that you force yourself to do so, because it will give your body that physical indication that you're not being attacked. Do be aware, though, that your saliva does dry up when you're under high levels of stress, and so water is really a good thing to have. I don't recommend sticky buns, and I don't recommend potato chips. a sour lollipop tends to work. It gets the saliva to kick in. Another thing that tells our body that we're not being attacked is having an opportunity to speak. Now, this doesn't happen very often during a testing environment. If your instructor if you have really high levels of test anxiety, you might want to talk to your instructor about it ahead of time and let them know that when you put up your hand and they come over, you're just looking for an opportunity to speak, even if it's to say, my mind has gone blank. Just getting those words out of your mouth will tell your body that you're not being attacked. You certainly wouldn't stop to chat with the tiger if it's attacking you. Many people like to listen to music when they're working on mathematics and studying. Most professors will allow you to bring in some kind of music, but be aware that the person sitting next to you should not be able to hear what you're listening to. So if you are studying at home using music, keep the music at the level that you would for a test. Keep it low, as if you were taking a test and there was somebody sitting next to you that you didn't want them to hear the music. Again, the testing environment should reflect the learning process that keeps the pressure of and the anxiety lower. And it will also help your brain associate it with low stress levels. Now, if you can also raise the stress level when you're learning, so if you plan to practice for the test, do it under pressure. Get a little timer that has a little ticker on it and time yourself and have that ticker going. And that would be a higher stress level than what would be in class. You wouldn't have a little timer going tick, 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 tick as you're trying to work. Raising the stress level during the study process means that the stress that you're actually under during a real test won't feel as high level. So that's another thing that you can do. And there's been some recent research also that if you would take 5 to 10 minutes before you take a test to write down your strengths and also share concerns that you have about taking the particular test, that's affirmations and concerns, that they have found through some pretty extensive research that this actually raises test scores. And the reason they feel it does that is it allows you to get out some of those emotions right before that test. And then it's not swirling around in your head anymore. You've got it down on paper, and now you can let go of it and just focus on the test. So those are 5 different things that you can do to help the testing environment to help you manage that test anxiety. Math anxiety, unfortunately, is much more difficult to deal with because most people who are dealing with math anxiety are not coming to class. They're not coming in to talk to the instructor. So if you have math anxiety, you really want to be proactive on this because you don't want to you want to take control, and you don't want the anxiety to take control of you. Group work is really important for this. Get comfortable struggling with the math, with others, and don't do it alone. That level of communication, your ability to explain your reasoning, what you understand, and where you're stuck, that will help you learn. It'll help you feel comfortable with feeling that anxiety about mathematics, and you'll realize other people are feeling the same way, and that usually tends to lower some anxiety. You want to emphasize understanding when you're learning mathematics. What do all the numbers and letters represent in the context of the problem? Wrap your brain around that context. That context will help you sort through some of those abstractness of the math that tends to make it a nervous situation. And realize that you're going to learn from your mistakes. We don't learn from what we already know. If you put down an answer and it was easy, that's something you already know. If you make a mistake, that's where the learning process comes from. Think about when you were first learning how to walk. You would fall down. If you gave up, you'd still be crawling around on your hands and knees. We make mistakes, we learn from them, we get up, and we keep going. And so realize that that's the same for mathematics. An active learner will engage in the learning process. Please, please, please ask questions in class. The instructors would like that. And if you find that instructors are not answering the question, meet them in their office hours and ask them the question and really push them on it. You need an explanation, you need examples, you need to advocate for that. Continuity. Try to find an instructor who's teaching a series so that you can stick with that instructor. Or if you can't stick with the instructor, find some colleagues you feel comfortable working with and sign up for the same classes together. Set up your own cohort. It has been found through a lot of research that students who stick with the same group going through a series of classes are more successful than those who try to do it completely on their own. So a study group, a cohort are really important parts of the process. And find yourself tutors that you can connect with. Again, in the math path, get there like signing up for a class. If you go to the same day, same time, you always get the same tutors. The tutors are in there certain hours, and that's the best way to work with the same person all the time. Then you don't have to keep making connections with people. And the last thing I'm going to recommend is to learn to use some meditation skills to improve your reduction of stress. You can turn off that flight or fight response as part of the brain and allow that upper level of thinking part of the brain to re-engage when you learn how to meditate. It also helps you to control your breathing, get that breathing at a deeper level. Again, that's a physical indicator to your body that you're not under stress. So those are the ideas to help you advocate for yourself. One of the things that we do on campus is we are now offering more cohort models. And what I mean by that is a series of courses that are being taught at the same time of day, in the same room, with the same instructor and the same students. And so you would sign up for the class. This way you don't have to every quarter change classes with a different teacher, with different classroom norms, and the transition from quarter to quarter is seamless. It feels like the same class because you got the same teacher. A lot of times it's the same book for 2 quarters. So it allows you to get familiar with other students and with the instructor's expectations. So we have those. They are not easily indicated on the course calendar, so definitely talk to your advisors. They know which courses and which instructors are offering these cohort model. For some of them it's formal, where you would actually sign a contract at the beginning of the first quarter stating that you're going to stick with it through the 2 or 3 quarters to complete the cohort. Others are informal, where the instructor is teaching the sequence over a number of quarters but does not have you sign a contract, and it's optional. So again, talk to your advisors. They know which ones those courses are, and that should help you also with your anxiety issues. So I want to thank you for asking me to work with you. On this page I've given you my link. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to talk to you. If you want to give me a call or email me, that's probably the best way to get to me. At the bottom I listed a book called Grow Your Brain. Well, actually, Grow Your Brain is an article. The book is Choke by Sian Baloch, and this is a wonderful book. Sian is going to be doing research here at the at Seattle Central Community College. She's from the University of Chicago, and we're going to be doing some research into math and test anxiety on our campus. But her book Choke is very readable, an easy read, and she talks about anxiety not just in mathematics but in sports and in business as well. It's a wonderful book if you're looking for some suggestions to help you. The article Grow Your Brain, if you're interested, I can give you that link. So if you go to this link, Grow Your Brain article, it's an article about how your brain learns. As you're learning, it's just like a muscle. It makes new connections all the time. So if you think that you don't have a math brain, well, taking math will create your math brain. You just need to work on it and take time to allow yourself to grow that part of your brain. So I hope you're successful, and thank you very much.